The strangest part was not realizing I might be pregnant. It was realizing my husband was the only person in the room who did not suspect me. The smell of espresso reached me across the Moretti breakfast table, rich and bitter, and my stomach turned before I could set down my fork. Nearly 20 relatives were gathered beneath the crystal chandelier, while snow pressed white against the tall windows. Dominic sat beside me in a charcoal suit, listening to Anthony discuss business. Then he saw my face. "Claire, I am fine." I was already standing. I crossed the dining room as calmly as I could, but the moment the powder room door closed, I gripped the marble sink and waited for the nausea to pass. For days, coffee had smelled wrong. Eggs had become impossible. I had fallen asleep at my desk twice that week. I had blamed work, stress, winter, anything except the possibility that made no sense. The door opened quietly. Evelyn Moretti stepped inside and studied me through the mirror. Her eyes dropped toward the hand I had placed against my stomach without realizing it. "Claire, when was your last period?" I stared at her. "That is impossible." I did not ask whether it was possible. My pulse began pounding. I counted backward. Once. Then again because I did not trust the answer. 11 days. I was 11 days late. "No," I whispered. Evelyn's expression softened. "You need a test. Dominic cannot have children." Saying it aloud made the silence heavier. Everyone knew. 13 years earlier, doctors had told Dominic that he would never father a child. The diagnosis had shaped his future, his family, even the original terms of our marriage. I returned to the dining room with Evelyn behind me. Dominic was already standing. Anthony stopped speaking. Every face turned toward me. "What happened?" Dominic asked. Evelyn answered carefully. "Claire may be pregnant." Nobody moved. Anthony's eyes went first to me, then to Dominic. That tiny movement told me everything. I knew what the family was thinking because I was thinking it too. If Dominic could not father a child, then how could his wife be pregnant? Dominic walked toward me. He was 37, controlled enough to silence rooms without raising his voice, but I had learned to recognize what other people missed. His jaw tightened. His breathing changed. Something fragile appeared behind his dark eyes. "Hope." He stopped in front of me. I waited for the accusation. "Are you okay?" he asked. I blinked. "What? Are you feeling sick? Do you need a doctor?" "Dominic, did you hear what Evelyn said?" "I heard her. And that is all you want to ask me?" His gaze stayed on mine. "Right now, yes." Behind him, Anthony shifted in his chair. Dominic did not even look back. That was when I understood everyone in that room suspected me except my husband. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt terrified, because if I was pregnant, then something Dominic had believed for 13 years was wrong. And powerful families do not like discovering that their oldest truths were built on lies. Nearly 4 months earlier, I had never met Dominic Moretti. I was Claire Bennett, 28 years old, working too many hours, counting every dollar, and trying to save the last thing my mother had left me. Then, on the coldest night of January, Dominic Moretti arrived at my front door carrying a contract that would erase my debt and change the meaning of freedom forever. The night Dominic Moretti came to my door, Chicago was buried under 6 inches of snow, and I had $32 left in my checking account. I was sitting at my kitchen table with 3 overdue notices when headlights washed across the living room wall. A black sedan stopped outside, followed by another. I looked through the curtain and saw a tall man step onto the sidewalk in a dark overcoat. He walked through the snow alone and knocked twice. When I opened the door, cold air rushed between us. "Claire Bennett," he asked. "Who are you?" "Dominic Moretti." I knew the name. Most people in Chicago did. The Moretti family owned restaurants, warehouses, construction companies, and enough property to make their name appear wherever money and influence crossed paths. There were quieter stories too. Stories nobody repeated around strangers. I kept one hand on the door. "What do you want?" Dominic glanced toward the papers, scattered across my kitchen table. 5 minutes. "You have too." Something almost like amusement touched his expression. "That will probably be enough." 10 minutes later, he was sitting across from me beneath the cheap light over my kitchen table. He placed a leather folder between us. Inside were copies of my mortgage records, the foreclosure notice, and debts connected to financial decisions my mother had made before she died. I stared at the total. "How did you get these?" "Legally." That answer sounds suspiciously rehearsed. People ask me often. I pushed the folder toward him. "I cannot pay this." "I know." "Then why are you here?" Dominic placed a second document on the table. The first words made me think I had misunderstood them. Marriage agreement. No, you have not read it. I did not need to finish the first page. 1 year, he said calmly. You marry me for 1 year. Your mortgage is cleared. Every debt listed in that folder is settled. When the year ends, you leave with no financial obligation to me. I stared at him. You expect me to believe you drove through a snowstorm because you cannot find a date? Dominic's mouth almost curved. I am not looking for a date. Clearly, I need a wife. Why? His expression changed. Not much. Just enough. My family is entering a period of transition. Marriage creates stability. And you picked a stranger? I picked someone with no connection to my family and no interest in our business. You do not know what interests me. I know you work as an office manager at a dental practice. You have lived in this house for 6 years. You have no criminal record, no significant investments, and no reason to remain in my world once our agreement ends. I should have been offended. Instead, I was unsettled by how carefully he had studied my ordinary life. Why me? I asked again. Dominic looked directly at me. Because I need a wife who has every reason to leave when this is over. I opened the agreement despite myself. Separate finances. Separate bedrooms. Public appearances when necessary. No requirement to leave my job. Then I reached one unusual clause. No expectation of children. Why is this here? Dominic became silent. Snow tapped softly against the window. Because there will not be children. You cannot know that. I can. Something in his voice made me stop. I was diagnosed 13 years ago. I cannot father a child. For the first time, the powerful man across from me looked less like a Moretti and more like someone carrying a sentence he had memorized until it stopped sounding painful. I closed the agreement. And if I say no? Dominic stood, buttoned his coat, and left the pen on the table. Then I walk out that door. Claire, and this conversation never happened. He reached the hallway before I spoke. How long do I have? He looked back at me. Until tomorrow morning. After he left, I sat alone with the contract, my mother's foreclosure notice, and a sentence I could not stop hearing. I need a wife who has every reason to leave. At 7:14 the next morning, I called Dominic Moretti and told him I would marry him. 3 days after I agreed to marry Dominic Moretti, I stood inside a courthouse in downtown Chicago wearing a simple ivory dress I had bought the night before. There were no flowers, no music, and no guests waiting with cameras. Dominic wore a dark navy suit and the same unreadable expression he had worn at my kitchen table. Evelyn Moretti served as one witness. Dominic's attorney served as the other. When the clerk asked whether I accepted Dominic as my husband, my voice almost failed me. I do, Dominic answered without hesitation. 20 minutes later, I walked outside as Claire Moretti. Snow drifted between the buildings. Dominic opened the car door for me. You can still keep Bennett professionally, he said. You remembered? You told my attorney. Most men in your position would expect their wife to use their name everywhere. His eyes met mine. Most men in my position are not married to you. I could not decide whether that was a compliment. The Moretti estate stood nearly 30 miles outside downtown Chicago behind iron gates and rows of bare winter trees. The house was larger than anything I had imagined, all limestone, dark wood, and tall windows reflecting the snow. Dominic showed me upstairs himself. My bedroom was across the hall from his. The agreement was clear, he said. This room is yours. Nobody enters without your permission, including me. That surprised me more than the size of the house. And my job, you keep it. My car, keep it. My friends. Dominic raised one eyebrow. Claire, I needed a wife, not a prisoner. For the first week, he kept every promise. His family was another matter. On Sunday, I came downstairs for breakfast wearing jeans and a gray sweater. Anthony Moretti looked at me as if I had arrived barefoot. He was Dominic's uncle, silver-haired, polished, and permanently disappointed by things he could not control. We have guests arriving at noon, Anthony said. Evelyn can help you choose something appropriate. I poured coffee. I already chose something appropriate. For breakfast, perhaps. Dominic entered as I set down the pot. The room changed immediately. Conversations lowered. Anthony straightened. Nobody announced Dominic's authority. Nobody needed to. Anthony gestured toward me. Your wife needs to understand appearances. Dominic looked at my sweater, then at his uncle. She appears dressed. I nearly smiled. Anthony did not. This family has standards. So does Claire. Dominic took the chair beside mine. You will learn, Anthony told me. I looked directly at him. Maybe, but probably not the lesson you were hoping for. Silence settled over the table. I expected Dominic to correct me. Instead, he lifted his coffee and hid the smallest trace of amusement behind the cup. Later that afternoon, I found him in the library. You enjoyed that. A little. Your uncle hates me. Anthony dislikes anything he cannot arrange. I folded my arms. And you? Can you arrange me? Dominic closed the file in his hands. I am beginning to suspect not. Does that bother you? He studied me for several seconds. It should. But it does not. That answer stayed with me. Over the following weeks, I attended dinners when the agreement required it, but I refused to become decoration. I kept working at the dental office. I drove my own car. I called myself Claire Bennett at work. Every time Anthony tried to turn me into Mrs. Moretti, Dominic quietly returned the decision to me. Then one night, while looking for a linen closet after the lights flickered during a winter storm, I reached the end of the second-floor hallway and found a door I had never noticed before. Unlike every other door in the house, this one was locked. Above the handle hung a tiny wooden star painted silver. I touched it, and behind me Dominic said, "Claire." His voice was different. I turned around. He was standing 20 feet away, staring at my hand on the door. For the first time since our wedding, the most controlled man I had ever met looked afraid of what I might discover. Dominic stood at the end of the hallway without moving, his eyes fixed on the silver star beneath my fingers. I pulled my hand away from the locked door. I was looking for the linen closet. That is downstairs. I know that now. The winter storm pressed against the tall windows behind him, and somewhere below us the old house settled with a low wooden creak. Dominic walked toward me slowly. He reached into his pocket, removed a small brass key, and stared at it for several seconds. "You do not have to show me," I said. His eyes lifted to mine. I know. That answer mattered. He placed the key into the lock. The door opened quietly. I expected another office, maybe a storage room. Instead, soft blue walls appeared beneath the hallway light. A white crib stood near the window. Children's books filled 2 shelves. A wooden rocking chair faced a fireplace that had not been used in years. Above the crib hung silver stars matching the one on the door. I stopped breathing for a second. Nothing in the room looked abandoned. It looked paused. Dominic. He remained in the doorway. My father had it finished when I was 23. I looked at the crib, then back at him. Before your diagnosis. Before everything changed. His voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. I stepped inside but touched nothing. Why would your father build a nursery before you were even married? Dominic gave a humorless smile. Because Morettis planned generations the way other families plan vacations. I understood then. This room had never been only about a baby. It had been about succession. A name continuing. A future everyone had already designed for him. What happened when the doctors told you? I asked. Dominic looked toward the silver stars. My father requested every report. More specialists were consulted. Eventually, I was told there was no meaningful possibility that I would ever father a child. And Anthony? His expression hardened slightly. Anthony began discussing what would happen to the family businesses if I died without an heir. I swallowed. You were 24. Yes. That is cruel. In my family, they called it practical. For the first time, I understood why the clause about children had been written so coldly into our agreement. It was not there because Dominic felt nothing. It was there because he had once felt too much. Why keep this room? I asked. His fingers tightened around the brass key. I tried to have it cleared once. What stopped you? He walked toward the crib and rested one hand on the wooden rail. His shoulders remained straight, but something in his face changed. The Mafia Boss everyone feared disappeared for one quiet second. I saw only a man standing beside a future he had been taught to mourn, because some part of me never learned how to bury something that never existed. I did not know what to say, so I did not say anything. I stood beside him while snow brushed against the windows and the silver stars moved faintly in the cold draft. After a while, Dominic looked at me. You should go to bed. Probably. Neither of us moved. Claire. Yes. Do not pity me. I studied his face. I do not. Then what are you doing here? Staying. His eyes narrowed slightly. Why? I looked around the nursery. Because you finally stopped talking to me like I was part of a contract. Silence passed between us. Then Dominic handed me the brass key. I stared at it in my palm. Why are you giving me this? Because I do not want this room locked anymore. He walked away before I could answer. I remained beneath the silver stars, holding the first thing Dominic Moretti had ever given me that was not written into an agreement. And that was the night I began to understand something dangerous. I had married him because I needed freedom, but I was starting to care about the parts of him that had never been free. After the night in the nursery, something changed between Dominic and me, although neither of us gave it a name. He still left for work before sunrise. I still drove myself to the dental office. We still slept in separate rooms and followed the agreement we had signed. But coffee began appearing beside my breakfast plate exactly the way I liked it, with 1 teaspoon of sugar and enough cream to turn it pale. When I worked late, Dominic somehow knew and made certain dinner was waiting when I returned. Small things, quiet things, things that were never written into any contract. 3 weeks later, I attended a charity dinner downtown with him. I had attended enough Moretti events by then to recognize the pattern. Dominic entered a room, voices softened, and people made space without being asked. He never demanded attention. It simply found him. That evening, Anthony spent most of dinner reminding everyone how important family appearances were. I ignored him. Dominic noticed. You are getting better at that, he said quietly. At what? Pretending Anthony is furniture. I almost laughed. Furniture is useful. Dominic looked down at his glass to hide a smile. We left shortly after 10. Freezing rain had started coating the sidewalks, turning the pavement silver beneath the streetlights. I stepped toward the car, my heel caught on the edge of the curb, and I lost my balance. Dominic caught my arm before I fell. My palm scraped lightly against the rough stone wall beside us. I am fine, I said immediately. Dominic looked at my hand. A thin red scratch crossed the center of my palm. Nothing serious. His expression suggested otherwise. Get in the car. Dominic, it is a scratch. Claire. His voice was low, but something underneath it made me stop arguing. Back at the estate, he took a first aid kit from the kitchen and sat across from me beneath the warm pendant lights. This is unnecessary, I said. Probably. He cleaned the small scrape carefully. His movements were precise, almost annoyingly gentle. Then I noticed his hand. It was trembling. Barely. But I saw it. Dominic. He stopped. What? Your hand. He looked down as though he had not noticed. It is nothing. You are afraid. No. You are terrible at lying when you use only one word. His eyes lifted to mine. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The clock above the stove sounded impossibly loud. Why are you afraid? I asked. I am sitting here arguing with you over a scratch. Dominic placed the bandage over my palm. I know. Then what is this? He leaned back, but his gaze never left mine. I tried to make the question easier for him. I am only part of the agreement, remember? Something changed in his face. The controlled expression disappeared. That is the problem. My breath caught. What is? He looked at my bandaged hand, then at me. You stopped feeling like one. The room became very quiet. I should have reminded him about the rules. Instead, I asked when. Dominic gave a small shake of his head. I do not know. That sounds inconvenient. Extremely. I smiled despite myself. He did too, but only for a second. Then his expression became serious again. Claire, I brought you into my life because I thought boundaries would make everything simple. And did they? No. I looked at the bandage he had placed so carefully over a wound that barely existed. Maybe people are not supposed to be simple. Dominic's eyes softened. You certainly are not. He stood and returned the first aid kit to the cabinet. Before leaving, he paused beside me. Good night, Claire. Good night. I watched him walk away and understood why his trembling hand frightened me more than his reputation ever had. Power had always been easy for Dominic Moretti. Caring about someone was the thing he did not know how to control. The morning after Dominic admitted I no longer felt like part of the agreement, I discovered something that made his words even harder to ignore. I was at work when the mortgage company called. I expected another question about the foreclosure suspension. Instead, the representative said, Mrs. Moretti, there is no remaining balance on the property. I stopped typing. That cannot be right. The mortgage was paid in full 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. I knew exactly what had happened 3 weeks ago. Dominic had unlocked the nursery. By 6 that evening, I was standing in his study with the mortgage statement in my hand. He looked up from his desk. You paid off my house. Yes. 3 weeks ago. Yes. Why did you not tell me? Dominic closed the folder in front of him. Because I did not want gratitude to become another debt. That answer stole half my anger and replaced it with something more dangerous. The agreement said you would stop the foreclosure and settle the debts attached to my mother's estate. It did not say you would give me the house free and clear. I know. Then why? He walked toward the windows. Snow covered the dark lawn beyond the glass. Because you should have somewhere that belongs only to you. I stared at him. Even after our marriage ends? Dominic turned. Especially then. My chest tightened. If everything is paid, what am I still doing here? Silence filled the study. Dominic opened a drawer and removed a thin document. He placed it on the desk between us. You do not have to be here. I looked down. It was a formal termination and release prepared by his attorneys. Every remaining obligation under our marriage agreement had been canceled. You signed this. This morning. Why? His expression remained controlled, but I knew him better now. Because the first time you chose to stay, you were choosing between me and losing your mother's home. That was never a fair choice. You offered it. Yes. His voice lowered. And I have regretted that part ever since. I looked at the signature. So I can leave? Tonight, tomorrow, whenever you want. And you will not stop me? Something painful moved behind his eyes. No. I packed one suitcase. Dominic did not come upstairs. When I reached the foyer, he was standing near the fireplace. He looked at the suitcase, then at me. A car can take you home. Thank you. That was all. No demand. No reminder that I was his wife. No attempt to turn affection into obligation. The front door opened. Cold air touched my face. I walked down the stone steps and crossed nearly 30 feet of snow. Toward the waiting car. Freedom should have felt lighter. Instead, every step felt wrong. I stopped with my hand on the car door. For weeks, I had told myself the contract was the reason I noticed when Dominic came home late. The contract was why I remembered how he took his coffee. The contract was why the nursery mattered. Now there was no contract. No debt. No reason to pretend. I turned around. Dominic was still standing inside the open doorway. I walked back toward him, carrying my suitcase. His expression changed when I reached the steps. Claire. I entered the foyer and set the suitcase down. The first time I stayed because I had no good way out. Dominic said nothing. This time I have every way out. His eyes searched mine. Then why are you here? I took the brass nursery key from my coat pocket and placed it in his hand, then gently closed his fingers around it. Because I am choosing to stay. For once, Dominic Moretti had no answer. The man who could command an entire room simply stood there staring at me, and I realized the most powerful thing he had ever done was give me the freedom to leave. Choosing to stay changed everything because, for the first time, neither Dominic nor I had a contract to hide behind. Nothing dramatic happened that night. There were no promises about forever. He simply carried my suitcase upstairs, stopped outside my bedroom, and said, "You are certain?" I looked at him. I came back, did I not? That is not the same as being certain. Then ask me tomorrow. He did. He asked again the next morning, and 3 days later, and once more the following week. My answer never changed. Somewhere between those quiet mornings and late dinners, our marriage stopped feeling borrowed. Weeks passed. Winter loosened its grip on Chicago. The snow along the driveway began disappearing beneath gray March sunlight. Then my body started behaving strangely. First, coffee betrayed me. I had loved coffee since college, but one Monday morning Dominic placed my usual cup beside me, and the smell turned my stomach. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Your coffee is terrible." He stared at the cup. "You have been drinking the same coffee for months." Then I have been very polite. 2 days later, I fell asleep on the living room couch before 8. The following afternoon, I pushed away my lunch after 3 bites. I blamed stress, then work, then the weather. I blamed everything except the impossible. Until Sunday morning. The entire Moretti family had gathered for breakfast. Espresso filled the room with its dark, bitter smell. My stomach turned so suddenly that I put down my fork and stood. "Claire," Dominic said, "I am fine." I made it to the powder room before the nausea became overwhelming. Evelyn followed me. She waited until I could stand straight again, then asked the question that changed the air around me. "Claire, when was your last period?" I stared at my reflection. I counted backward. 11 days late. The memory of that morning collided with the present, and this time I knew what happened next. Evelyn told Dominic. I returned to the dining room. Everyone stared. Dominic asked whether I was all right while Anthony watched me like a problem requiring an explanation. But there was one thing nobody at that table knew. Before returning downstairs, Evelyn had quietly placed her car keys in my hand. "There is a pharmacy 2 miles away," she whispered. 20 minutes later, I was standing in an upstairs bathroom with 3 pregnancy tests lined across the marble counter. Dominic waited outside the door. I had told him he could come in. He had refused. "This is your moment first," he said. I watched the first result appear, then the second, then the third. Positive, positive, positive. My knees weakened, and I sat on the edge of the bathtub. "Claire," Dominic's voice came through the door. I opened it. He looked at my face, then at the 3 tests behind me. For once, he seemed unable to speak. "3," I said quietly. His eyes returned to mine. "All 3. I nodded. Silence stretched between us. Then the fear arrived. Not fear of the pregnancy. Fear of what 13 years of certainty could make a man believe. "Dominic, do you think I betrayed you?" His answer came immediately. "No." I searched his face. "How can you be certain?" He stepped closer, but stopped before touching me. "Because a diagnosis can be wrong." His voice was steady. "I know who my wife is." My eyes burned. "Your family will want proof. Then they can question the medical records." His gaze never left mine. "They do not get to question your character." Downstairs, voices carried through the house. Anthony was already demanding answers. Dominic looked toward the hallway, then back at me. Something cold and controlled settled over his expression. "Stay here." I shook my head. "No. Claire, if they are going to discuss my life, I am going downstairs." For 1 second, the old Dominic might have ordered me to remain. This Dominic simply nodded. "Then we go together." He held out his hand. I took it, and as we walked toward the staircase, I realized the impossible pregnancy was not the only thing about to be tested. So was every truth the Moretti family had believed for 13 years. Dominic and I walked downstairs hand in hand, and the moment we entered the dining room, every conversation stopped. Anthony stood near the fireplace with 2 other relatives while Evelyn remained beside the table. His eyes dropped to our joined hands. "We need to discuss this privately." "We are private," Dominic said. "I mean family." I felt Dominic's fingers tighten around mine. "Claire is my family." Anthony's expression hardened. "Then you understand why this requires an explanation." I stepped forward before Dominic could answer. "Ask the question you actually want to ask." Anthony hesitated. "Claire, you have been staring at me like I committed some offense. Say it." His voice became carefully polite. "If Dominic cannot father a child, then the family deserves clarity about this pregnancy." The room went silent. I had expected the accusation, but expectation did not make it hurt less. Dominic released my hand and moved half a step forward. I touched his arm. "No, let me." He looked at me, then nodded. I faced Anthony. "You are allowed to be confused. You are not allowed to turn that confusion into an accusation about my character. This concerns the Moretti succession. It concerns my marriage and my child." Anthony glanced toward Dominic. "A medical test would settle everything. When our doctor says testing is appropriate, Dominic and I will make that decision together. Not because you are entitled to proof." Anthony opened his mouth again. Dominic's voice stopped him. "Question the medical record. Do not question my wife." Nobody answered. His words seemed to change something in Evelyn. She looked from Dominic to Anthony, then slowly sat down. "The medical record," she repeated. Dominic turned toward her. "What about it?" Evelyn stared at the table as though searching through an old memory. "Your father kept copies of everything." "I know. Not everything you saw." Dominic became still. Evelyn continued. "After your diagnosis, he requested the laboratory reports directly. There were consultations, letters, second opinions. He kept them in the private archive downstairs." Anthony shifted near the fireplace. It was small, almost nothing, but I noticed. So did Dominic. "Why was I never given those records?" he asked. Evelyn looked troubled. "Your father said the matter was settled." An hour later, Dominic, Evelyn, and I were inside a storage room behind his father's old office. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. Dust-covered boxes labeled by year. Anthony had left the estate without saying goodbye. Dominic noticed that too. We searched until Evelyn found a box marked with Dominic's initials and the year of his diagnosis. Inside were medical invoices, letters, and laboratory reports. Dominic read each page slowly. Then his hand stopped. Claire. I moved beside him. He held two documents. One was the summary he had been shown at 24. The other was an earlier laboratory report. These numbers are different, I said. Yes. Evelyn leaned closer. What does that mean? Dominic shook his head. I do not know yet. He turned another page. A follow-up evaluation had been recommended 6 months after his original diagnosis. Beneath it was confirmation of an appointment at a clinic in Boston. Dominic stared at the date. This says I attended. Did you? I asked. His face had gone completely still. I have never been inside that clinic. Evelyn covered her mouth. I looked at the signature beneath the appointment record. It resembled Dominic's name, but the handwriting looked too careful, like someone had practiced it. Then I noticed another document clipped behind it. A payment authorization for administrative services. The company name meant nothing to me. It meant something to Evelyn. Dominic, she whispered. What? She pointed toward the company listed at the bottom of the page. Anthony used to control that firm. Silence filled the archive. Dominic did not raise his voice. He simply took out his phone and called his attorney. I need every original medical record from 13 years ago, he said. Every laboratory report, every payment, every signature. Start with Boston. He ended the call and looked at me. For 13 years, Dominic had believed his body had taken away his future. Standing beside him in that dusty room, I began to wonder whether his future had not been taken by his body at all. Maybe someone had taken it from him on purpose. The truth took 3 weeks to uncover, and those were the longest 3 weeks of our marriage. Dominic's attorneys obtained the original laboratory records, payment histories, archive correspondence, and the appointment documents from Boston. Dr. Nathan Cole, a fertility specialist with no connection to the Moretti family, reviewed everything independently. On a gray Thursday morning, Dominic and I sat across from him in a quiet Chicago office while rain traced the windows. Dr. Cole placed the reports on his desk. Mr. Moretti, you were given an inaccurate conclusion 13 years ago. Dominic did not move. Was I infertile? Your fertility was severely reduced. That is not the same as having no possibility of fathering a child. My hand found Dominic's beneath the desk. His fingers were cold. So it was possible? I asked. Dr. Cole nodded. Unlikely, but medically possible. Dominic stared at the papers. Why was I told otherwise? Dr. Cole turned one report toward us. This is the original laboratory result. This is the summary later provided to you. The language was changed. More importantly, follow-up testing was recommended, but records claim you attended an appointment you say never happened. Dominic's jaw tightened. I never went. The investigation answered the rest. Payments from a consulting company Anthony once controlled had reached an administrator connected to the clinic. Archive correspondence showed Anthony discussing succession with Dominic's father during the same period. Anthony had known Dominic's chances were low, not zero, and had helped make certain Dominic believe there was no hope at all. Without a future child, influence over the Moretti businesses would eventually move toward Anthony's side of the family. Dominic called a family meeting the following evening. Anthony arrived expecting an argument. Dominic gave him documents instead. You knew, Dominic said. Anthony looked through the pages. I protected this family from uncertainty. You protected the future you wanted. Your father agreed that stability mattered. Dominic's voice remained calm. Then he was wrong too. Anthony looked toward me. Everything changed because of her. Dominic followed his gaze. No, everything changed because she made me question what I had accepted without question. There was no shouting. Dominic removed Anthony from every leadership position under his authority and directed that all future business communication go through attorneys. Then he walked away. Months earlier, I would have imagined power looking different. Louder, colder. That night, Dominic taught me that sometimes power was simply refusing to become the person who had hurt you. My pregnancy continued normally. When our doctors determined the timing was appropriate, additional testing confirmed what Dominic had never asked me to prove. The baby was his. He read the result once, folded the paper, and looked at Dr. Cole. I waited for the question the Moretti family had spent years preparing for. Was it a boy? Was there finally an heir? Dominic asked neither. Is Claire healthy? Dr. Cole smiled. Claire is doing very well, and everything looks normal. Dominic closed his eyes. The breath that left him sounded as though he had been holding it for 13 years. Later that spring, we stood together in the nursery. Sunlight filled the blue room. The silver stars turned slowly above the crib. I rested one hand against my stomach while Dominic touched the wooden rail. I used to hate this room, he said. I know. I thought it represented everything I could never have. And now, he looked at me instead of the crib. Now it reminds me that nobody gets to decide our future for us. I smiled. Not even you. Dominic reached for my hand. Especially not me. I thought about the night he first appeared at my door with a contract and enough money to solve every problem I had. Back then, I believed power meant having the ability to make someone stay. Dominic believed it too. We were both wrong. He had married me because he needed control over his future. I had married him because I needed a way out of mine. Somewhere between the debt, the locked nursery, and an impossible second chance, we learned the same truth. Love was never proven by possession. Dominic gave me every reason and every freedom to leave. And in the end, that freedom was exactly why I chose to stay.